The destroyer watched as one by one her fleetmates were bombed, torpedoed, and sent hurtling to the seafloor. Planes buzzed above her like vultures, waiting for their chance to feast on her. There was nowhere to run, and it was her time. There would be no glorious escape this time, and it was time to face the Reaper. Welcome to Shipwreck Sunday. My name is Eleanor. Just a quick disclaimer for a younger audience before we dive in. This story may be disturbing to some, so viewer discretion is advised. Okay everyone, let's get into it. Wakatsuki was part of the Akizuki-class destroyers that were originally designed as anti-aircraft escorts for carrier battle groups, but were modified with torpedo tubes and depth charges to meet the need for more general-purpose destroyers. Wakatsuki in specific was laid down at the Mitsubishi Nagasaki shipyard on March 9, 1942, being launched later that year on November 24th. She was completed and commissioned on May 31st, 1943. Before we get too carried away with her story, let's look at her specs. Wakatsuki was a destroyer with her displacement sitting at 2,700 long tons standard and 3,700 long tons fully loaded. She was 440 feet 3 inches long, had a beam of 38 feet 1 inch wide, and a draft of 13 feet 7 inches deep. For her complement, she averaged between 263 and 300 officers and enlisted men. As for propulsion, she had 4 Campon water tube boilers, which fed 2 Parsons geared steam turbines capable of producing 52,000 shaft horsepower, which turned 2 screws and gave the ship a designed speed of 33 knots. She carried enough fuel oil to give her a range of 8,300 nautical miles at 18 knots. Next, let's look at her armament. She does go through improvements and refits over the years that will change her armament, so we're going to look at what her final form was as of November of 1944. In November of 1944, she had 8 4-inch 65 caliber dual-purpose guns, 35 25mm anti-aircraft guns in 3 sets of 7 and 1 set of 14, 4 24-inch torpedo tubes complete with 8 Type 93 torpedoes, and finally 56 Type 95 depth charges. Wakatsuki also had a Type 21 early warning radar on her foremast. If you're wondering about armor, destroyers are often very lightly or unarmored, so they can be light and more maneuverable. Of course, there are always exceptions to that, but in general, they are more lightly armored than other warships. Wakatsuki was raring and ready to go, and she'd be deployed into the thick of it. If you're enjoying this video, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know down in the comments section below. Okay, let's get into her career. When she was commissioned on May 31st, 1943, she was placed into the 11th Destroyer Squadron for training. During these initial months, she operated alongside the destroyer Tamanami during their training duty of Hashirajima, including managing to tow the 40,000-ton battleship Nagato at a speed of 12 knots. And it was during this time period, on the 8th of June, that the battleship Mutsu suddenly and violently sank in harbor to a magazine detonation, prompting Wakatsuki and Tamanami to assist in rescuing the 353 survivors. If you'd like to hear about Mutsu, let me know. On June 22, 1943, Wakatsuki departed Japan for the first time to escort the battleship Musashi, which was carrying the remains of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, who'd passed away when his bomber aircraft crashed into the jungle on the island of Bougainville. Yamamoto was a very prominent figure for the Imperial Japanese, and the transport of his ashes was massively important to them. After this, Wakatsuki then escorted the troop transport Sagara Maru when she was crippled by a torpedo from the submarine USS Harder, requiring her to be towed to Japan. While underway, Sagara Maru was hit by another 2 torpedoes from the submarine USS Pampano, which finished her off as Wakatsuki abandoned her to sink. Wakatsuki escaped. Shortly after this, she was reassigned to the 7th Destroyer Division with her sister ships Suzutsuki and Hasutsuki. From September 18th to the 25th, she escorted the combined fleet on a mission to counter U.S. carrier raids, but no action occurred. A similar mission occurred from October 17th to the 26th, and again they encountered no enemy forces. And then from October 30th to November 1st, she took part in a troop transport mission from Truk to Rabaul. Upon arriving at Rabaul, she was appointed as part of a task force with the goal of hunting an Allied cruiser force to replicate a Battle of Savo Island-style naval victory. This action became the Battle of Empress Augusta Bay on November 1st and 2nd. However, Wakatsuki contributed very little to the battle, unleashing several salvos of 3.9-inch gunfire but missing her shots, before narrowly avoiding a collision with the heavy cruiser Haguro. In turn, the light cruiser Sendai and the destroyer Hatsukaze were sunk, and several other ships were damaged, sending off the Japanese task force and ending the battle in a US victory. Later, over the course of several days, Rabaul was attacked by hundreds of land-based and carrier US aircraft, during which Wakatsuki was attacked by several aircraft and damaged by bomb near misses but not directly hit. She was, however, caught on video by US dive bombers and was shown in a newsreel of the bombing of Rabaul. The US mistook her for a cruiser and claimed to have sunk her. In reality, she only took minor damage and took part in several troop transport and escort missions, being present during the sinking of the submarine USS Sculpin by the destroyer Yamagumo, but not actually engaging, before being dry docked in Yokosuka for repairs from November 25th through the rest of the year. Essentially, so far, Wakatsuki is getting a participation award. With the start of 1944, she escorted the aircraft carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku from Kure to Singapore, before escorting the newly commissioned aircraft carrier Taiho. She remained with the carriers for the next following months prior to taking part in anti-submarine patrol off Tawi-Tawi. On June 6th, she was present when the destroyer Minazuki was torpedoed and sunk by the familiar USS Harder, with Wakatsuki swooping in to save 45 survivors. In Europe that same day, the D-Day assault on the beaches of Normandy commenced. On June 19th, Wakatsuki served as a carrier escort during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, specifically assigned to Taiho. Taiho was torpedoed by the submarine USS Albacore and sank in a fiery explosion, prompting Wakatsuki to save survivors, transferring Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa to the heavy cruiser Haguro. In addition, the aircraft carriers Shokaku and Hyo and 2 oil tankers were sunk, ending the battle in a US victory as Wakatsuki managed to survive undamaged. So she won't save you from getting torpedoed, but she will rescue you after it happens, or at least that's how it seems thus far. After the battle and horrific defeat for the Japanese, Wakatsuki escorted the fleet on a troop transport run from July 8th to the 20th from Okinawa to Manila and then on to Linga, and she returned to Japan on September 19th with a tanker convoy. On October 16th, she arrived at the scene of her sister ship Suzuki, which had been damaged by a torpedo from the submarine USS Sturgeon, and escorted her to Kire for repairs. On the 20th, she regrouped with the fleet in Brunei for Operation Show Go, better known as the Battle of Leyte Gulf. This was a final charge by the entire Japanese fleet to prevent the Allied landings at Leyte, and it would end disastrously for the IJN. Wakatsuki served her role as an escort to the decoy aircraft carrier force attempting to lure out American aircraft carriers, allowing for the powerful surface fleet to attack and sink US troop convoys. She left Brunei on the 22nd alongside Zuikaku, the last remaining aircraft carrier to have attacked Pearl Harbor, and the light carriers Zuiho, Chitose, and Chiyoda, and these carriers launched some 120 kamikaze suicide bombers at the American fleet. Most either missed or were shot down. According to a few sources, a few Zuikaku kamikazes broke through and helped to sink the light carrier USS Princeton, but this claim isn't fully supported by the evidence we have. On turn, on the 25th, the decoy force was raided by US carrier aircraft in what became the Battle off Cape Engano. All 4 aircraft carriers, the light cruiser Tama, and the destroyer Akizuki were all either sunk or crippled and later finished off. As for Wakatsuki, she evaded several air attacks before helping to save survivors from the sinking Zuikaku. As this was underway, a task force of US cruisers, which had delivered the coup de grace to the crippled Chitose, pounced on the Japanese fleet, prompting the destroyer Hatsuzuki to sacrifice herself, taking the entire attention of the US cruisers and sinking with most of her crew, while Wakatsuki and the others successfully retreated loaded with survivors. Regardless of if we agree with Japanese ideology during World War II or not, we have to give it to them. They were always willing to sacrifice so much for their cause and for their comrades, and they never went down without a fight. Unfortunately, there wasn't much of a fight left for Wakatsuki, and her end was nigh. Thank you so much to our amazing YouTube members and patrons. If you'd like to have some awesome perks like episodes a full day in advance, join our YouTube memberships today. Alright, let's look at her final battle and sinking. Immediately after the Battle of Cape Engano, Wakatsuki returned to Brunei and unloaded hundreds of survivors from several sunken Japanese ships. From October 29th to November 1st, she escorted the light cruiser Oyodo to Manila. Upon arriving, Wakatsuki was planned to take part in a fleet action, but on November 5th, a large-scale carrier air raid sank the heavy cruiser Nachi and damaged the destroyers Akebono and Okinami, canceling any plans. On November 8, 1944, Wakatsuki, alongside the destroyers Naganami, Hamanami, Asashimo, and Shimakaze, departed Manila on an escort mission to escort 4 troop transports destined for Ormoc City. They sailed smoothly for the first 3 days, but on November 11th, all hell broke loose. 350 planes from U.S. aircraft carriers were originally supposed to attack the battleship Yamato, but these orders were cancelled as they instead turned their attention to the troop convoy in what became part of the overall Battle of Ormoc Bay, which we covered on Friday if you are interested in the nitty-gritty details of this battle. In a one-sided slaughter, all 4 troop transports were sunk with ease, and afterward, the planes turned to the destroyers. Multiple bombs and torpedoes sank Naganami, Hamanami, and Shimakaze as Wakatsuki watched on, understanding she was next. There was no way out, there was no escaping, and she'd not be rescuing survivors today. She survived the initial attacks through excellent maneuvering, but eventually, the first bomb hit the ship's bow, followed by a second to her stern, immediately rendering her dead in the water. Attacking aircraft dogpiled the destroyer as she began to tip by the bow and sink. The abandoned ship order was issued, and she sank bow first with a heavy loss of life, as 290 men went down with the ship and only 45 survivors made it to shore. And with that, the destroyer that had rescued so many couldn't save herself, and she disappeared, just another number in wartime statistics so many years later. Her wreckage was discovered in early December of 2017 by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen's research vessel RV Petrel at a depth of 869 feet under the surface in Ormoc Bay. She was found to be heavily damaged from both her sinking and sharp impact with the seafloor, resting on her starboard side. Though she didn't sink any ships and she didn't have a career rich with violence and valor, Wakatsuki still had an impact on World War II, primarily with the lives she saved. She witnessed numerous sinkings before experiencing her own, and she remains a reminder of a long-forgotten battle lost to time. The ocean liner was a breathtaking work of art, far before her time, and the beloved great babe to her designer. She was to be the peak of innovation, even laying the transatlantic telegraph cable. Unfortunately for this beautiful ship, the world just wasn't ready for her, and life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Next week on Shipwreck Sunday, we get into the Great Eastern.